This is for you, Alexis. We got this question came in from Olivia E. How does this pattern of violence against his partners contribute to proving RICO and other charges? It's a great question.
So it's the pattern of violence. And like you touched upon before, Jesse, that with the sex trafficking, with the coercion, the force, or the fraud, so that supports that allegation. With regard to the racketeering, that's also one of the elements as to whether there was the act, this criminal act that was done. So the reason that we keep hearing the things over and over again about that, the violence, is for the prosecution to prove that. Now, the defense is playing up that it's domestic, and obviously the prosecution is trying to play that down, and it's the actual act of violence, not the fact that it was against someone that they were allegedly in a relationship with.
Alexis, got a question from I'm MS Gaming. Question, Jesse and panel. Why is Diddy watching coverage on his own trial? Because how does he know how he looks in the sketch of him enough to respond and say he looks like a koala? Yeah, it was reported that he kind of went up to the sketch artist and said, stop drawing me, making me look like a koala. I don't know how much he's watching, what he's seeing, but is that unusual for a defendant to do this in a high-profile trial like this?
I would say no. I mean, I think that anybody that was on trial, if there was footage of the trial or pictures in this instance, commentary, they're going to be listening. I think it is a good gauge. It's almost like an exit poll that you can kind of, gauge very loosely what maybe the jury is thinking. Now, the jury's not necessarily looking at these sketches, for instance, but what they're thinking about other stuff. But yeah, the sketches are always characters, and so that's just kind of what they are. But I guess I would feel the same way if I was him, that I wouldn't necessarily like that sketch.
So we put up a poll. Dateline is Diddy's favorite show. Do you think he's aware their latest episode was about him? 68% say yes, 31% say no. Alexis, let me ask you about this. Overall, we've heard all of the direct examination from Jane. So when the prosecution puts her on the stand, they did it for a reason. It's everything they potentially wanted to get out of her testimony to prove sex trafficking, racketeering, transportation, to engage in prostitution. How effective of a witness do you think she was? Or do you think she presented more problems for the prosecution?
I think the prosecution needed to put her on the stand, like we discussed earlier, to show that pattern. I mean, presented more problems, not necessarily. I mean, the problem is that the defense is trying to get everybody to believe this is basically just domestic violence and nothing more. So, I mean, this is just another, individual that opens the door that they can claim or allege that it's just domestic violence. But it is interesting who the defense has chosen to do the cross of Jane. First of all, they chose the female attorney to do it, which is interesting. But as well as they didn't choose Brian Steele, and he kind of is the cross-examining wizard. So they might not think that it needs to be such a strong cross as the previous witness, Maya, that Brian Steele did the cross on.
It's, look, and I guess the question is, Alexis, how do they defeat that charge? You could say sex trafficking, is it actually non-consensual? Is it really force, fraud, coercion being used? Is there really a criminal enterprise for racketeering? But transportation, to engage in prostitution, Jane's saying that she helped pay for these men to travel, paid them. There's cash being given. Cassie said the same thing about a worker being used in multiple different locations. She was having these freak-offs or these hotel nights, according to Jane, in multiple locations. I don't know how they fight against that one, Alexis.
I don't think they're going to win that one, but I disagree with my panel members. I do think that the prosecution has hit the elements of the charges, including the racketeering and also for the sex trafficking and the drug trafficking. Now, whether the jury is going to go and convict him is, in my opinion, the real question. I think we have a celebrity here, and just overall, jurors don't like to convict celebrities in general. So the prosecution has to overcome that. Then on top of that, we have this, confusion that happens with racketeering charges. Jurors generally don't really understand that, and that takes a lot of education. And then we have thrown into the mix this confusion that the defense is doing really well trying to convince the jury that this is just domestic violence.
Alexis, we have a follow-up question to the perjury question. How is this from Sam K? How do they prove perjury, assuming they move forward and actually want to charge them with perjury, which again, very, 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 very unlikely.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jesse. It's highly, highly unlikely that they're going to charge them with perjury. How you would choose, I mean, you have to prove that they had an intent to lie and it was a lie, that they lied about something. So that, it generally usually isn't necessarily so difficult to prove it when they do charge it. But once again, it's a fine line. Is it just there's a recollection issue? Is it, they just don't have a specific fact? That doesn't rise to the level of perjury.
Alexis, we got a super chat question from Nene and refers to you, so I will allow you to take it. And it's a compliment, so thank you so much, Nene. The women suffered trauma. Can they bring an expert witness to explain why they forgot timelines? I agree with Alexis. Keep her on the show.
Well, thank you, Nene. I appreciate it. So they could do that. They could bring in an expert to explain how somebody responds to trauma. Definitely. I mean, one of the things is, first of all, even if you aren't responding or been in a traumatic situation, just simply being in court and testifying is a very stressful and maybe some would say traumatic experience in itself. And so people are nervous. And in this case, it just kind of raises the ante because you have all the media and the situation surrounding it. So it's nerve-wracking just to be in there. It's understandable that with time passing, that specifics are not going to be recalled as clearly.
Alexis, this is a question that has been on. I haven't seen it in a little bit, so I apologize I didn't get to it sooner, but this is a great question from Eye to Eye Podcast. Hi, Jesse. Does the prosecution have any intention on having a forensic accountant to tie all of this together? There doesn't seem to be much evidence, just he said, she said testimony. I mean, it's an important question if you're talking about a racketeering criminal enterprise where he allegedly used cash and his businesses and his staff to facilitate crimes and cover them up. They did have his former, CFO, the head of his finances testify, but do you think they need a forensic accountant?
I'm not aware that they're planning on calling a forensic accountant. I don't necessarily, and I agree with you, normally in a racketeering case, whether it be criminal or civil, you're going to have a forensic accountant. So this is an excellent question. But there's a lot of evidence about cash. That things are being paid in cash. So I'm not sure if they necessarily need it, but it definitely wouldn't hurt if they did end up calling the forensic. But they may get to it through KK, the assistant, as to that moving of money.
Okay, we got a poll that we put up. Do you believe Brianna Bungolan committed perjury on the stand as the defense alleges? You ready for this? 48% say no. 28% say not enough information, and 23% say yes. That is so interesting, Alexis, because I think from an objective legal point of view, you could say her testimony was the most problematic. It doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean it's not true. She might not remember certain details about what happened, but I think we can all agree the defense did a good job at questioning her and really putting her on notice. Yet, when you listen to the poll from our viewers and you wonder, is that a snapshot of the jury? They don't believe that this is a case of her maybe intentionally lying on the stand. What does that tell you?
Well, what it tells me is that even if it doesn't go to perjury, they're not believing her testimony. We've got, I think it was 60% of people that are not believing or they don't think it was credible. And that is really important because if we're throwing out her testimony, that's very problematic to the prosecution. We don't need it to rise to the level of perjury for it to be an issue for the prosecution in this case.
Alexis, we talk so much about Sean Combs paying her rent and whether he threatened to withhold her rent, and that apparently he's still paying for her rent. So the question from Erica Gilchrist is it in the defense's favor that Diddy is still paying Jane's rent?
I would argue yes, it is in her favor. But remember, I mean, in his favor. But remember, it is, you know, the coercion, the financial coercion. It is her belief. Did she believe? Was that his intent to use that? And so it's not just, you know, he. There's an argument to be made that he's continuing to pay her rent, knowing that she was going to be called to the stand, and probably you wouldn't want to cease paying the rent at that particular time. So you could take it either way.
Okay, Alexis, I'll throw this to you. This is from Mary Breslin. Hello, watching from Scotland. Wow. If he's found not guilty for racketeering, do you think the prosecution will then charge him with domestic violence and any other charges they can? XX.
Okay, first of all, domestic violence is a state case. We're in federal court. And also, I believe the lion's share of this, I think the statute may have run. We may have a couple that are straggling that were within the statute of limitations. But I do not think that the state is going to come in and charge him at this time with domestic violence unless there's something that hasn't come out in trial. But remember, it's not just the RICO. Although I do think, you know, I keep saying, I think the prosecution is hitting the RICO bingo card, the element. But we have the other charges. We have the drug trafficking and the sex trafficking and the prostitution as well.
We're going to get some final thoughts here, or for final questions. Alexis, this is from Walter Hines Glees. Will 50 Cent give his 2 cents?
I love it. I might have to steal that, but we don't know. I mean, maybe he will, maybe he won't. We'll see. But I mean, a lot of these people that were in his, you know, circle that we saw pictures and videos over the years have kind of gone into hiding. They're not publicly coming out. I mean, even his friends are not showing. His alleged friends are not showing up in the courtroom or making statements.
Alexis, you agree with the poll?
I agree with the poll. I keep saying they're hitting that RICO bingo card. So I think the question is the jury going to convict or not?